speak now to the new Levelling Up Housing and Communities Secretary, Simon Clarke, previously Chief Secretary of the Treasury. Mr Clarke, lovely to have you with us.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time this morning. It's going to be a busy day for you guys, of course, with this new administration. How far off were we with our prediction of the way that this package is going to work?
Well, as you'd expect, I can't preempt the Prime Minister's announcement today, but what you're absolutely right in saying is that the government is going to be taking meaningful action to address the concerns which viewers will be feeling and which, of course, aren't restricted to family finances. They affect businesses as well, so that we can have certainty for the country about what we're going to do over the course of the winter ahead. We all know that as a consequence of what Putin has done in Ukraine and his attempt to weaponise particularly gas as a way of trying to break the West's resolve in terms of standing up for democracy, that there are really tumultuous events in the energy markets. We need to provide a solution which doesn't just address this in a way which means that we keep coming back to it, but which provides a lasting framework for how we're going to sort this for people over the months ahead.
Now, just the proposals, because I respect that you will not tell us what the plans are, you don't want to preempt the Prime Minister, but just the proposals have led to some turmoil in the markets. The pound's at its lowest level since 1985. I mean, isn't that the markets telling you that whatever you're proposing is going to be really damaging and dangerous to the economy?
Well, we all, obviously, would never want to find ourselves in this situation. And there's no question that, you know, this is the latest in a series of quite extraordinary interventions that the government has had to make to support families and, you know, which obviously reflect our absolute determination to do the right thing for the British people. But let's be clear, if we fail to act, if we don't protect the economy against the shock of the size and scale that we're talking about, then there's going to be enormous economic damage in any event. So the hardship that not just the October price cap, but the forecast January and then April iterations would cause would be enormous. And we're already hearing from businesses, and this is something I was obviously hearing in my former Treasury role, about the deep concerns they have about their energy bills. And so, you know, we could have anticipated, I think, a huge amount of damage to the economy had this rise gone ahead unchecked. Yeah. So you're balancing, frankly, two very challenging things. In these circumstances, I think the country will say, and I think markets will respect, that this is the most sensible thing to do.
Oh, I mean, respect is one thing, but their reaction is another. And, of course, the markets will behave as they think is in their best interests. And it would seem as if economists, people who are doing these kind of forecasting, don't trust this plan that's coming forward.
Well, if you look at the UK's most recent round of debt issuance, you know, that was well covered. You know, there was much more demand for our debt than was needed to cover the latest auction. We're paying around 3% for our debt. That's a perfectly sustainable level. The UK is obviously a very stable, very strong economy, subject you know, to a very clear regulatory system and the rule of law. We are a safe bet and a safe haven, as we always are, frankly, in these kind of situations. And the government is clear that a fiscally responsible approach sits at the heart of our plans. But we cannot fail to respond to the magnitude of the moment. Liz Truss is clear that, you know, as Prime Minister, her first priority this week is to provide that certainty. And I think, you know, this is something which, you know, notwithstanding the fact it's difficult, it's bold, it's brave, we have to do, because the country can't really think about anything else until we've done this.
Well, with the idea of debt in mind, then, the Prime Minister ruled out the idea of expanding the windfall tax, stuck with a plan on corporation tax as well. So, in the future, that debt burden is going to be much, much higher, isn't it?
Well, you know, as with the financial crisis in 2008 and as with the COVID situation, the government has to respond to these major crises and then deal with the consequences in a measured way over time. But the Prime Minister is rightly clear that we cannot keep on with the mindset that we can tax our way to growth. We can't keep doing that. We need these oil and gas companies to be focusing on more extraction. And extraction of North Sea gas is up 26% compared to this time last year, which is fantastic. We need to see a lot more of that, because the reality is energy independence is the lasting solution to the situation we are in. And we can never again, and this is the wider context of this strategy, find ourselves in a situation where we are reliant on others for the things that we need. We've got to get much closer to self-sufficiency. These companies are absolutely critical to that happening, and happening at the pace we need.
I mean, self-sufficiency is, of course, what everyone will want. But you were Chief Secretary of the Treasury. So Keir Starmer quoted Treasury figures yesterday, said £170 billion in excess profits is going to be made by energy companies.
Are
those correct figures?
Look, the reality is that if companies are making large profits, then of course they will also be paying large amounts in tax to the Exchequer.
Yes.
And there's already a windfall tax, which was introduced earlier this year. And critically, it's worth remembering that oil and gas companies pay double the main rate of corporation tax. They pay 40p in the pound compared to 19p as the main rate. So it's not as though they don't pay their fair share of taxation, but these are the people who are going to be delivering that next generation of North Sea oil and gas investment. And we've got all of these fields that we frankly need to bring on stream as quickly as possible. You know, Labour will always say, because it's in their DNA, the solution is to tax, tax, tax. Actually, what we need is to invest and to grow. This is how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, let's stick with that 170 billion. You haven't said those figures are wrong, so that is a correct estimate.
Well, no, I'm not going to confirm or deny figures which... I said you don't recognise those specific figures.
OK. Look, there's a lot of money that could be got from taxing these oil and gas companies more. And the government is deciding to put all that money onto the country's credit card. There was a time when that was seen as fiscally irresponsible. The Conservative government said that was fiscally irresponsible.
No,
now is it OK
what we
to do
is we fix the roof when the sun is shining. The sun is conspicuously not shining right now. This is a global storm, and the UK is, like the rest of the West, having to react to events which are, not of our making. So the invasion of Ukraine, hard on the heels of the COVID crisis, have obviously prompted us to have to do some dramatic and extraordinary things. But we can do those things because, frankly, we spent the last 10 years repairing the damage of the 2008 financial crash. And that's why what George Osborne did, what Philip Hammond did, mattered so much, because that fiscal consolidation has given us the space to do what is required in the teeth of an emergency. That's why, frankly, Conservative economics makes sense.
So that you have no concerns about all this borrowing that's going to be loaded onto future generations, my children's generation?
Well, I mean, look, we are all very conscious of this, and I absolutely believe that the state should live within its means, whenever possible. But you have to also balance what we're seeking to do here for the real economy in the near term against that challenge. We're comfortable that this is the right approach. Critically, what we cannot do is just allow this situation to play out without a decisive intervention. I think what we're seeing from Liz Truss's government is early, decisive intervention, which will provide a lasting framework, critically. So we're not coming back to this at intervals.
It's not like you've just won a general election. You were in government for 2 months. This could have come earlier in the summer.
It couldn't, because there wasn't a government with a mandate to do this. And I'm afraid, as a result of the situation we faced over the summer,
you've just said how
we've only now got the chance to govern.
You just said how extraordinary the situation is, so you could have done something earlier in the summer if you chose.
I'm afraid to say we weren't in the position to do that. We are now. We're acting today before that price cut comes in.
Let's just move on to your new brief, as Levelling Up and Housing Minister. Just what is Levelling Up and what does it mean to you?
What is Levelling Up? Levelling Up is the delivering of opportunity to all parts of the country. And the reality is I represent a constituency up on Teesside in the northeast, and the communities I represent are proud, are passionate about their lives. But let's be clear: the opportunity in places like Loftus or Middlesbrough is not the same as it would be here in Westminster. And we have got to close that gap. We've got to close it through infrastructure investment. We've got to close it, above all, through economic growth. And the delivery of more enterprise, more economic opportunity is the absolute key to levelling up. And that's what I'm determined to help deliver. Opportunity
delivered through fracking in people's neighbourhoods? I mean, we know how unpopular fracking is with many communities.
Well, we have to look at all forms of energy extraction. And this, again, leads us into the discussion that the Prime Minister will be opening up as part of her announcement today. But look, if we want energy sufficiency, we have to look at every source, including clearly new nuclear, more renewables, and there's fantastic news going on with technologies like offshore wind, where the price just keeps falling. But yeah, we also ought to look at technologies like fracking. We have to do so in the most sensitive possible way, with community consent at the absolute heart of our policies. But there is a balanced approach to this question. The net zero commitment that the government has made by 2050 is critical. It's something that I helped to push for when I was a backbencher. It's something which I passionately believe unlocks, frankly, the greatest energy security as well as economic opportunity. But in the near term, we need all kinds of gas as a transition fuel, and that's something the Prime Minister will be saying more about later today. Move on to just one last thing. The new cabinet, you're a new member of the cabinet, you're in the old one as well, but we'll stick with this new cabinet. Now,
Why did you vote against expanding same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland in 2019?
I made that choice because, candidly, I believe in devolution, and the situation we faced in 2019 was that we didn't have a functioning assembly in Stormont. I don't believe that as a English MP, it's really my prerogative to be voting on social issues in Northern Ireland, which are properly a matter for a devolved assembly in Northern Ireland, elected by the people of Northern Ireland, where clearly there are different cultural and social conditions to in the rest of the UK. I simply believe, and I stand by my decision, that it wasn't for me to tell others how to live their lives. I personally am all in favour of same-sex marriage, and I'm thrilled that it's in place in England. I've got many, many friends who live happily in same-sex marriages, but it isn't for me to tell other people how to live their lives in parts of the country where devolution is in place. I believed at the time, and I think I completely stand by that it was right that they should have that say over what happened, but from politicians accountable to them.
Okay, I mean, it's a very clear answer. I appreciate that, Mr. Clarke. Just fine, let's go back to fracking as well and the net zero commitment. So if you do expand fracking, more extraction of gas from beneath the earth, how are we going to meet those net zero commitments?
Well, we're absolutely clear that net zero, as I say, sits at the heart of our policies. And, we've got to use gas as a transition
By 2050
fuel.
still?
Yeah, by 2050, absolutely. There is no resigning from that commitment. We've just got, wonderful new advances like the Hornsea 2 offshore wind farm, which is the largest, I think, in Europe, and that's going to power 1.3 million homes. That's just gone live. We've got the big decision which has just been taken on Sizewell C, the new nuclear power station. But, we cannot avoid the reality that gas from Russia has underpinned not just Britain but Europe's wider energy strategy. That dependence has left us desperately vulnerable. It has to end now, and in the interim, we have to make sure that we're using all available sources of domestic fuel. I think the public would think that's the only sensible thing to do.